Welcome to News Conference X-Ray, special segment of Today in LA Weekend. With us, the Honorable Judy Chu, member of the U.S. House of Representatives, a Democrat from Monterey Park, representing the 27th District, and one of the leaders in the House sit-in demanding a vote on two specific pieces of gun legislation. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you have been demanding a vote on the House, you and your Democratic colleagues, no fly, no buy. That is, if you're on the terror watch list, you can't buy a gun. Plus, getting rid of what you call a loophole in background checks for guns that are purchased at gun shows.
Right.
Now, the House Speaker on Friday said, actually on Thursday said, I will have a vote this week on no fly, no buy. You happy about that? Placated?
I wish that it was a bill that was meaningful, but it's a bill that was written by the NRA. It's similar to Senator Cornyn's bill that was voted down by Democrats, and all it does is if you try to buy a gun and you're on the terrorist watch list, then the government is allowed to have 3 days in which to go to court and have to have convincing evidence that you are indeed a terrorist.
And that's not a step in the right direction, even a small step.
Well, it is something that's unenforceable. 3 days to make a convincing argument that a person is a terrorist, whereas right now, if you are on the no-fly list, it's because of suspicion.
Right. Their argument, though, is that because of suspicion, but without a warrant, without seeking an arrest, you can put somebody's name on a list and deny them a constitutional right, that being the Second Amendment.
Well, there is due process in the procedures as it is now. There is an administrative ability to ask what the reason is for you to be on that list and then to attempt to get it off. And you can also go to court and get your name taken off, and that actually has been successful.
But to those who've said, listen, the terror watch list is so cumbersome, they've even suggested that members of Ted Kennedy, the late Ted Kennedy's staff was on it, and that there's no rhyme nor reason as to who ends up on it and who ends up off it.
Actually, 99% of the cases have had to do with a name matching somebody who was on that list. So that's the Ted Kennedy situation. And in that case, if you make an inquiry to the FBI and say you are not that person, then you would not be on that list.
Let's talk about Orlando. The gun laws in California were such that that gun would have been against the law here. The gun that was used in San Bernardino also violated California standards. And, of course, Turkey and Istanbul, they have some of the toughest gun regulations in the world, and semi-automatic weapons are banned, yet we saw what happened there. Convince us that any of the legislation you're advocating for would have any impact on gun violence in America.
Well, first of all, let's look at California. California is #1 in terms of its gun measures and in protecting our residents. It is number 42 in terms of gun deaths. So it has played a major role in stopping the gun deaths. Let's look at background checks. The Brady campaign is the one that got the background checks done on the federal level, and that instituted a measure by which 2.6 million people were not able to buy guns because of those checks. And as a result, we were able to save lives.
You had an event earlier this week where you talked about this, and this was what Maxine Waters had to say, your colleague.
We're asking Paul Ryan to take this up on the floor of the House. He's spineless, he's gutless, and we want to take this bill up.
Spineless and gutless, Speaker Ryan, is that the kind of bipartisanship you want? People see that and they say, no wonder they don't get along.
Well, we may not all use the same terminology, but the feeling is something that we all indeed had, and that was the fact that despite the fact that we had the worst massacre in history, 49 people murdered, young people who were just out to dance, that once again, the only action that Republicans would allow was a moment of silence. We've had massacre after massacre, and yet such inaction. We can't even get a bill passed to study the effects of gun violence. That's how bad it is. And so we are very, very frustrated. That's what led to the sit-in.
And it should be pointed out, though, that the Orlando shooter was on the no-fly list but was taken off. And part of the legislation you're supporting is a look back, which means what?
Yes. A look back would allow the FBI to be notified if somebody who was on the terrorist watch list within the last 5 years is attempting to purchase a gun.
Honorable Judy Chu, member of the U.S. House of Representatives, 27th District, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Gun control will be